Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to a new episode of Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my repeat guest is Laura Cohen. Laura and I were doing a conference, was supposed to be that 2 weeks ago? Anyway, I'm not sure good on timelines, but we recently...
Time flies.
Yeah. Well, anyway, a few weeks ago, she was planning to present at the conference, and we had scheduling conflicts. So I wanted to still get I wanted to get that information to you guys. Lauren was going to come. She was going to speak about some securities law. So I think there's honestly, there's a lot to learn from this because there's a lot of people doing this stuff wrong. There's a lot of violations that I see all over the internet. And it's never an issue until someone reports it. It's usually not
Right.
the SEC.
Or someone loses their money.
Yeah. That's usually why they report
and they're like, "Oh, now we're gonna do something."
Yeah, some deal doesn't go correct, and then they bring this up, and then they go down this rabbit hole, and they make like the operator basically going through a securities audit. I've never done it, but I've talked to two people who have done it, and it is a miserable experience. So I think it'd be much better if everybody just did this the right way to start with and not have to deal with that kind of situation. So Laura Cohen is back again. Even before we jump on this, maybe we'll do an intro to Lauren. And everyone knows you for the E2 visa services and some of the other business stuff. So maybe we'll do a little bit of an intro of that, and then we'll talk about the security stuff.
Okay, sure. So first of all, it is Lauren. I don't know if Glenn loves calling me Laura, but it's okay because my name is Lauren.
Maybe just cut off my tongue.
Always call me Laura. It's just the thing that happens, so it's no problem. Glenn still loves me, and it's mutual. So yes, I am Lauren Cohen. I'm originally from Toronto. I am here in South Florida. I just posted a picture of me a few years ago when I was in Toronto on this day, and it was snowing, and I just closed on my new house that I'm moving into toward the end of the month, and it will never be snowing outside of my window here. I can promise you that. Okay, so I'm sure that Glenn has some snow probably outside of his house, right?
Not yet.
Already?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Sprinkle in the air like yesterday or the day before, but it never really. It was more wet rain.
Transpired.
Yeah. Well, I guess rain's always wet, but it's
Rain
coming.
is okay,
it's cold.
but
It's cold enough to get snow. We just haven't got it.
Yeah, I remember several years ago, obviously when I was still a kid, it was Halloween, and we lost my dog, and we went to look for the dog on Halloween, and it started snowing on Halloween, and I was like, that is unbelievable. So I'll always remember that. So anyway, I'm Lauren Cohen. I am a cross-border lawyer and realtor and real estate investment expert, and I help people invest in real estate and get visas through real estate acquisition, including my friend Glenn. And I am not a securities lawyer, but I know enough about securities law to be dangerous. So when Glenn asked me to speak about this, I did some research just to make sure. I've done a lot of EB5. EB5 is a program where you basically invest in a US project and get a green card through passive investment. It's like it is an investment in a security, but that involves very, very, very sophisticated documentation. And what we're dealing with, for the most part, with most of Glenn's tribe are people that want to raise a little money from their friends and family, or want to do joint ventures with multiple people, or think that they're going to be syndicators and don't know how to do it, and think that because they're in Canada, they're not subject to US securities laws. So we're here to kind of dispel some of those myths and go through as much information as possible. And if I'm able to help you guys to clear some air, that would be great. Now, one thing Glenn said, which is so true, I think that so many people do this the wrong way and don't realize how simple and really not expensive or inexpensive it is to do it the right way. And so you start raising money, and once you get into the weeds a little bit, and maybe your project is not, as Glenn said, as successful as you had hoped, and somebody gets upset, they're going to sue. And in the US, you know what that means. So the Securities Act in the US was introduced in 1933, which is probably around the time of the Great Depression. And there was a lot of people trying to raise money through different means. And basically it covers everything that is a security. Now, what the heck is a security? What do you care what a security is, right? Why is it relevant? Well, people don't understand, most people, that anytime that you exchange money for a good or a service, that's a security. Because if you're not exchanging money for money, certainly there's potential of a contract, but it becomes a security because you're investing in something and getting some kind of an interest in that thing, and that interest is a security. You can call a duck, but it's going to still be a duck. Okay, so at the end of the day, anytime that you're investing in a project with multiple investors, or even with one or two other investors, there's a potential of it being labeled as a security and therefore being subject to U.S. securities laws.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and this can be as simple as doing like a single family house that has like 3 investors, 2 investors even. You have to be careful.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And people aren't careful enough, and they think that if they go to their friends and family, like if somebody raises money from Glenn, right? Glenn's invested in a lot of different projects. So somebody thinks, oh, I know Glenn. He has a big following. Let me just see if he's interested in investing in this project. Well, all of a sudden, unless you're best friends with Glenn, or he's your kid or your dad or something like that, it can become a security. It applies to any capital raises for US projects. It's borderless. Violations are stiff, and non-compliance, and this is important, can lead to a piercing of the corporate veil. So what the heck does that mean? Yeah. So people think, Canadians particularly, that by setting up a US entity, you are protected across the board, and you're not. There are certain instances, not only where they'll pierce the corporate veil because you're violating securities laws, but also there's instances of fraud and all kinds of other things where they will pierce the corporate veil and go after you personally. So whatever your assets are, no matter where those assets are in the world, including your assets in Canada or anywhere, they will be subject to this claim, whatever the claim is. And that's important to understand too, because look, you think that maybe you're just risking the property or the project in question, but you're not. It can go way, way, way beyond that. And there's not a lot of areas of law that have this level of potential impact, but securities law does. It's very big. Any offer or sale of U.S. securities must be either registered or tax or exempt. Now, registered means that it goes through a registration. An exempt means like something like a private place memorandum, which is exempt from approval, but it still has to be prepared by securities attorneys, so that all of the right disclosures and disclaimers and all that stuff that you need, the terms and conditions basically are in there. Because without those terms and conditions, who's responsible? You. And you don't want to be. Okay, it's the last thing that you want. What is an offer? Pretty much anything can be an offer of securities. I see in Glenn's group almost on a daily basis people saying, I have this project, I have that project, but can I raise money? Can I raise money? And I try to comment, but I can't give legal advice. And by the way, just to clarify, none of this is legal advice, okay? Because I'm just sharing information.
We're just giving a general overview so everyone understands
the importance of working with qualified professionals and getting this done the right way.
Yes.
So, boy, we are finishing each other's sentences, Glenn. That's scary. We've known each other as long as Glenn and I, it happens. But The reality is, you're just putting yourself at risk for no reason. People want to save the couple of $1,000. We can get this all done for you for like maybe $20,000 with a subscription agreement and the proper disclosures and disclaimers and everything like that. And then you can do this freely. You can go to accredited investors and potentially even non-accredited investors in certain circumstances. So why put yourself at risk? It's not worth it.
No.
Anything, as I said, can be a security. An investment contract can be a security, like a joint venture agreement, a promissory note. Even a promissory note can be a security. An investment contract involves an investment of money, potentially as a joint venture in a common enterprise with an expectation of profits from efforts of the promoter or the developer or the founder or the project manager or whatever. So pretty much that leads
that could be almost anything. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And let me tell you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I just wanted to let you know that I've created a new coaching program. I believe the new coaching program has way more value than any of the programs that have even existed in the past. What we've done is pre-recorded all the lessons so that you can work through it at your own pace, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to meet up on a regular basis to answer the questions, do deal analysis, and actually spend our time together working on things instead of spending our time learning things. I think this will make a seamless transition to buying in the United States and will help you solve a lot of your problems. If this is of interest to you, go to glensutherland.com/coaching. I hope to help you guys invest in the United States, and I hope we provide as much value as possible. Back to the podcast.
Their arms are far reaching. Okay, they are going after you if they can. And there's something called a whistleblower law in the US. Well, what that means is, let's say Glenn sees somebody doing this and he's like, oh, they're doing this wrong. And he reports it to the US Securities and Exchange Commission, and there's a reward given. Glenn can get, I think it's up to 30% of the reward, just as a quote unquote finder's fee for being the whistleblower. So there's an incentive to report. Okay. Yeah. These, how many of you are involved in these? Pretty much everybody. You have an LLC, right? Maybe you have an LP. You have shares of stock. You have passive investments. You are a syndicator, or you're investing in a syndication. Well, guess what? Those are securities, and they are subject to US securities laws. A syndication, and this is from my favorite Black's Law Dictionary, which is like this thick. I still have my copy from law school, is organizing a group for a common purpose, to promote a common interest, or to carry out a particular business transaction. That's a joint venture, right? Right there. Pretty much all of these things that we see in the group could potentially fall into this category. A syndication versus a joint venture. So in a syndication, in a joint venture, there's an investment of money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profits, but the investors generate their own profits. So there's no passive investors in a joint venture. You're actively involved in developing the business. When you must comply with securities laws, well, pretty much all the time.
Lauren, I think we almost should go back a slide. I think we got to drill that in, and as one of the things that I added a lot to the most recent parts of my course, even, is it's the syndication versus the joint venture. You said it there, was it has to be active. A joint venture is supposed to be active, right? In a syndication, if you're a complete passive partner, then it could be it likely is a security that you're selling. You have to be giving active roles in a joint venture, right? Everyone has to have roles to do. That your document shouldn't be saying that the one person is, the typical layout that you always hear when you go to the real estate meetups in a joint venture is we have the money partner and we have the working partner. And that actually is not good at all, right? You should be having a working partner and a working partner, or a working partner and jobs for the joint venture. If the other person has no jobs and they're literally just investing money, that you could be getting yourself into trouble, right? By doing
absolutely 100%. So if let's say that Glenn and I develop a project together. Okay, we're working on a flip together. We're doing whatever we're doing on, and we're working together. We're investing together. That's a joint venture. We are actively, let's say Glenn takes the role of hiring the contractors and I take the role of getting the title and all of this, okay? We're both having roles. And in an LLC operating agreement, you can define those roles, or you can define them in a joint venture agreement. But if Glenn is doing everything and all I'm doing is giving him money, that, like he said, that's not a joint venture. The other problem is, and this is something that's really, really important, okay? People try to work around this by doing loans with a promissory note. But I just said that could potentially be considered a security as well.
Exactly.
So if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a duck, okay? Just remember, as I always say, as I learned from my first day of law school, you can't do indirectly what you can't do directly. So don't try to work around the system because you think that you can. You can't. And you're gonna get in trouble eventually. You may get away with it initially, but you're gonna get in trouble eventually. Okay? Mm-hmm. And even these things, raising money from passive investors, selling LLC interest to passive investors, repeatedly borrowing private money. I have a client right now. She bought a property in Orlando and she doesn't want to close. She wants to sell her interest or get a partner or something like that. But as she's soliciting these potential partners or purchasers, she's actually selling a security. And that could become problematic for her. Now, she's just one person, but at the end of the day, you know, she doesn't listen to me and she does what she wants, but that is still potentially passive, raising passive money or selling your LLC interest, both of which could qualify here as a security. So to follow securities laws means that you either register the offering or you choose an exemption, or you document your compliance with all of the elements of this. So compliance and making sure that you document the steps toward compliance are essential, because if there is a claim, at least you can defend it. Okay, there are many securities exemptions, and this slide I could share with you guys, which is probably useful, because if you limit the number of investors or you limit it to accredited qualified investors, there are ways to qualify for exemptions, but you aren't the one to decide that. We have to bring on our securities law team to figure out what the exemptions are, how you can make sure that you meet those exemptions and satisfy those exemptions, and that you don't end up violating them, and you have to disclose all the risks. That's so important. Disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. To be an accredited investor, you have to have $1 million net worth, 200,000 individual income, or 300 if it's a couple. Okay, and that's how an investor could potentially qualify as an accredited investor. This table talks about the different securities exemptions. Mainly,
Lauren,
there's
sorry to cut you off. On that last slide,
yeah.
Is that the same
Yeah.
if you're an American as a Canadian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now, this does no, I am not talking about Canadian securities laws, because that's when you are raising money, even in the US, you as a Canadian are still impacted and required to comply with Canadian securities laws, which are not federal, they're province by province. So the Ontario Securities Commission has its own rules, for example, as does the Alberta Securities in BC. You know, I go on, I do know the provinces, believe me. So I try to quiz my kid, he has no idea. He just knows like Ontario and that's it.
Which that's why you want to get a good securities lawyer, because you have to understand that, because if you're going to say set up an entity in Canada that's going to accept the money, and the idea is to keep the Canadians from having to pay taxes to the IRS, so they're going to do it on the Canadian side, you're likely going to have to register with both securities commissions, right? I literally just went through these calls, and it is much more expensive to do that setup. Right. So it does change your numbers if you're trying to do it that way, rather than just accepting the money on the American side. But then if you do it on the American side, the likelihood is that you're going to be cutting K1s for each of the people who invest, and they're going to have to file with the IRS, which, you know, is not it's a small little thing. You could cover, if you wanted to, as the operator, you could cover the costs for that filings or whatever, which won't be much, but there's a million different ways to set this up. Well, maybe not a million, but there's a few ways to set this up, and the costs differ drastically. that's my 2 cents from going through this whole thing.
That is so true. And people do think that if they do it all in Canada, they avoid this, and that's not true.
No,
because, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is borderless. You can't accomplish your goals of avoiding U.S. securities laws by handling it all in Canada. It just won't work. Now, this is securities exemption tables, which I can also share if you guys want. It's just all legal stuff. You know, what has to happen. There is no dollar limit on any securities exemption, just so you know. And the relationships are defined by, if you want to go, if you want to pursue an exemption, you have to have a pre-existing relationship and a substantive analysis of the person's status as an accredited investor.
And you may have to prove that if you get audited. You may have to prove that you have a relationship with them. Right. That's why people have like
document. Yes. Just like really Glenn's favorite thing, documentation.
It's
So,
not, I hate
um,
it. I do it, but I
I
hate
know that's why I was being facetious, but it's essential, and he knows that. And
Yeah.
he gets it done. May not like it, but he knows that it has to get done. And none of us like it. Even I don't like it. So, and I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
I like it for my clients, but for myself, I'm the worst. You have to be competent, trustworthy, and likable to be a successful syndicator because you are raising money. And then for non-US investors, and this is important, there's something called Reg S, Regulation S, which is in a securities exemption. It applies to non-US persons not living in the US, wiring funds from outside of the US. But as I said before, you may well qualify for a Reg S exemption, but how are you going to know that if you don't have the right documents prepared, and you aren't consulting with a securities lawyer? Are you going to determine that? Because that's not something I would suggest anybody do on their own. This slide is really important for you guys, okay, for Canadians. Securities laws as I mentioned, in Canada, in each province, FIRPTA, we all know about FIRPTA, that's the tax withholding that the IRS applies to non-residents, okay, non-citizens, non-residents, corporate structures that minimize double taxation. All of you should be consulting with, whether it's me or Ali or both of us and our teams, to make sure that you're avoiding that double taxation and legal liability in the process, and investing strategies that minimize taxes for non-US persons. So these are all things that need to be considered that are not necessarily related to US securities laws, but are related to you raising money in the US or even investing in the US.
Right.
A securities offering involves all of these things, all of these elements: a PPM or disclosure document. A PPM is a private placement memorandum, an operating or limited partnership agreement, or sometimes both, a subscription agreement, an investment summary, which is a lot of the disclosures, securities notice, and property information. Now, who thinks, Glenn, would you want to do all of these things on your own? Because I sure as heck would not.
No, no, honestly, I wouldn't want to do it. Even just the amount of work involved, it sounds like a lot, but
Right.
it's about doing it correctly as well. It's one of those things you just want to make sure this stuff's getting filed with like government agencies. You want to make sure that this is done correctly. I wouldn't tackle this.
I cannot underscore it enough. Really. And I will be honest with you, okay? Look, I didn't do my own green card, okay? Or my own citizenship. I do it for others, but I didn't do it for myself. And when you're preparing your own documents, it's always best to have a third party be involved, no matter how much of an expert. If I was the best securities attorney in the world, I would still have a third party securities attorney review my documents, because you are looking at them with rose-colored glasses. Okay. And you have to be objective, not subjective. And you can't when it's your own, even when it's a business thing. It just doesn't happen. So to structure deals with investors, as I mentioned, you can do a joint venture, a syndication, and you can earn money in a syndication in various ways. Okay. Acquisition, asset management, refinancing, carried interest or cash flow, share of sales proceeds, and real estate commissions or property management fees. And all of these things are available to you as a syndicator if you follow the rules.
Yeah.
So we go back to following the rules, please.
Well, you brought up a good thing there too, like with just some of the acquisition fees and stuff. And if you're on the opposite side and you're wanting to be an investor in this, it is one of the biggest things that will differ from operator to operator. Some of them will take a huge chunk. It actually is more common in Canada to take a larger piece of the pie as a percentage of the what the GP gets and what the LP gets. I've seen several syndications set up in Canada where it's a 50-50 split. In the US, it's more commonly to be a 70-30, where the passive investors, the LPs are typically getting like 70%, and the operators will get 30. And even the one we're structuring, what we're doing right now, maybe I shouldn't even say this in case we change something, but what we're structuring on ours is 80-20. So we're taking 20%. And people are like, oh, you get 20% of everything? Like, well, no, there's a pref share first. So they get paid, the LPs, they get paid first, right? So they're going to get their pref amount, their 8% or whatever it is, depending on the deal. And then afterwards, if there's like a capital event, a refinance, a sale, that's where it gets sort of split with those 80/20s. And it's important because you're the one putting the money in if you're the passive investor. And if you're not getting much out of it, then, you're not getting the proper, from operator to operator, it's, you are a big piece of this puzzle to get done, the capital. For Lauren, a couple questions. What we touched on this briefly during the call. You said, like, even in my Facebook group, you see people with posts. I see posts all the time that I just shake my head at, that are completely illegal. Should you be posting on Facebook?
No, absolutely 1,000,000,000% no. If you want to speak to individuals that you know and have a relationship with, that's way less problematic. But if you're posting on Facebook, you are opening yourself up to all kinds of liability.
Yeah, you should not be going,
so no,
I have a deal. Would you like to invest?
No deal.
That is
Right.
completely against the law, what you're trying to do. If you are trying to raise money, the better way to do this, the right way to do this, is to post past deals, have conversations, go out for coffee, get to know people, play the long game, build a relationship with them. And after you've done a bunch of these, then they know you after a while. You've had several conversations, you've had coffee, you've had a dinner, a meal, you've built this relationship over time, and that, and it's not a complete stranger investing in this, because if it's an investor, that's definitely a security, what you're selling.
100%.
Even a single family home.
That's not legal advice. That's just like clear, like clear as day. Okay. Yeah. You have to really, I can't just overstate the importance of this, because securities and franchise law are the two areas where they would pierce the corporate veil and go after you. And securities is a much bigger field, because the numbers are much greater. And if you are in violation, you can lose a lot more than just whatever the investors invested. And there's fraud charges that you may or may not be subject to, whether you intentionally did it or not. There's so many different ways to get caught up in this mess. And it's not that hard to prevent it. So I work with an amazing team of securities attorneys. Most of those slides were prepared in consultation or collaboration with them. And like I said, I am not a securities expert. But what I am is I'm able to know what needs that attention. And you should come to me and ask me, Lauren, what about this? Lauren, what about that? And I'll say, look, let's get our team on a call. And it's well worth your investment of, a small nominal fee for a proper consultation. Any securities lawyer that does not charge for a consultation, you should run. Just saying, okay? Because they are billing out at a very high rate, and everything that we will share with you is generally going to be flat rate. So even for security stuff, but don't cheap out on this, because there's too much at risk.
And if you want to do this raising of money, do it right. Just register.
Do it
right? Like, just register. Hire the attorneys and register. And if you don't want to do this that way, you want to do it the cheap way, then do it with friends and family and relationships and active roles, right? So you just mentioned that you're not a securities lawyer.
No.
What are you? What kind, let's talk about what you do.
Oh, that fun thing.
Yeah.
I am an immigration lawyer, but it's a little bit different. I help people that are trying to figure out how the heck to invest in real estate and get a visa. That's really my sweet spot, my focus, mainly for Canadians. I figure out how to get them invested, start their investment journey, start making a bit of money, and hopefully eventually obtain an E2 visa or another type of visa, especially if they're from another country. So, but we are complete full service facilitators. So if you want to come to me and say, I have everything in place, I just need my visa, I'm going to bring in my legal team to help you with that. But if you come to me and say, I have some real estate, what the heck do I do? That's perfect. I'll figure out with my team exactly how to get you through that finish line of getting that visa in place and saying, thanks, Lauren. And listen, one thing that's really important is people think that because you get a visa, you have to move to the US. Glenn, is that true?
No, I might move to the US at some point, but I'm getting my visa, and I right now have no intention of doing it. Sometimes you just want to do it to make your crossing the border easier.
Easy.
Sometimes you just want to do it to, like we were talking about with all this, to be in compliance. If some things I can do if I go to the States could be considered working in the United States, and you need to have a visa to be considered working in the United States. And that's the thing, like, oh yeah, you can go invest in the United States, and it's not to go down this crazy rabbit hole, but I just had a call with Chris, my Canadian CPA, and Ali, my American CPA, on Wednesday morning, and we went through this whole thing. And right now, Canada's changing their tax laws, and we're restructuring my company just to make sure we're the most tax efficient as possible. But basically, the way they're trying to, they're splitting this out as active versus passive income. And honestly, you want it to be active income. But if you start saying I'm doing active income and you don't have a visa, then there's a conflict. There's a conflict there, because the way that Canada, they now their active income rate for running your own business is actually cheaper than the US. So depending on your like almost every single tax thing is cheaper in the US, except for this one thing, which is the active income roll on your Canadian corporation in Canada. And like I said, I am not an expert on this. That's why I hire experts on this. I'm regurgitating what I just did on my call yesterday. But you want to go down that path, because it will save you taxes every year by being able to write off a certain percentage as active parts. And so it involves a lot of extra steps. It involves a lot more documentation of even what you're doing every day. But it does make sense. And to comply with all of those things, if you're saying I'm actively working in the United States and that's how I want to pay my taxes, you should have basically a license or a visa to be actively working. Otherwise, you're gonna comply with somebody and be in discompliance with somebody else. And so you just want everything to be lined up. Anyway, there's my rant. I'm trying to summarize like an hour and a half call into 2-3 sentences, but basically it makes sense. You grow big enough, it makes sense. You want to live in the US, it makes sense. You want to have better taxes, it makes sense.
Listen, a lot of people, including Glenn, have been investing for a long time in the US. And generally speaking, you're going to be okay, generally. But that one time when you're not okay is that time when you need this. And that's the time when you need it in your pocket before it happens. Because if it happens, and we hear about it, at least I get a call at least once a week about somebody that's had this happen. Oh, I've had a business for 8 years or 6 years or whatever. Why is this happening? And the reason is because they have discretion. I was turned away once myself. So I've been through it, okay? And this was before 9/11. And since passports are required now, and there's so many things that are implicated by your interest in investing in the US. And as COVID goes away, and as we become more attuned to people crossing borders and doing all of those kind of cross-border activities, it's really important to understand that you need a visa in your pocket, even if you don't plan to live in the US. There are huge advantages attached to it.
Anyway, Lauren, people are interested in visas. How do they reach out to you? How do they find you?
The best way is hello@investingacrossborders.net. hello@investingacrossborders.net. Everything is branded around Investing Across Borders on, LinkedIn, on Facebook. I'm in Glenn's group. I'm very active in there. I try to answer questions and be responsive without giving legal advice. We are doing a series of information sessions. I don't know when this is airing, but we'll always doing regular events. But just reach out to us. Our toll-free number is 866-724-0085, 866-724-0085, and it would be our pleasure to help you and guide you through this quagmire of legal stuff. So thanks, Glenn, as always, and hopefully our next one, we're going to celebrate Glenn's visa being granted in minutes at the consulate soon enough. So
like always, Lauren, thanks for coming on the show. Tons of value. I'm sure there's most people who listen to this, unless they've already done their, research on securities, learned something here. So I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you. My pleasure, Glenn. Take care. Talk to you soon. Bye.
That was a nice video. Bye.